Good morning and welcome to Ask the Expert. I'm Joe Taylor. This morning, another in the ongoing series of programs presented by the Northwest Regional Key Program for Quality Early Learning. The program, through the Northwest Institute of Research, oversees a grant from the Office of Child Development and Early Learning at the Pennsylvania Department of Human Services and the Department of Education. The goal of the program is to improve the outcomes for young children as they prepare for school. John Poza from the Pennsylvania Key is the host of the program, and he's here with us throughout the series. Good morning, John, and who do we have on the line this morning?
Good morning, Joe. We have Nick Scott on the line, and Nick is the Vice President in charge of operations and development at his third-generation family-owned business, Scott Enterprises of Erie, PA. And under Nick's leadership and strategic planning, the company has successfully expanded into over 20 locations now, with 5 additional properties under development, equaling $50 million in investments and many more in the pipeline. His leadership extends to the community, where he has served on Pennsylvania's Early Learning Investment Commission since 2009. Welcome to the program, Nick.
Well, thank you very much to both of you. I appreciate it, and I'm happy to be here.
Nick, I know your name always comes up quite often in terms of early learning and the importance of businesses investing in early childhood education. You're on the Investment Commission, of course. Tell me a little bit about how you got involved in the movement towards supporting the importance of quality early childhood education.
Sure. Well, I'm not your typical person that you'd find would be involved in a topic like this. I'm in, like you said, a hospitality company business where it's a third generation. My grandfather started the business as a young boy. He came over from Greece at the age of 13 in 1916 and found himself here alone, left his parents, didn't see him for 35 years, and just had this really big sacrifice to come and find a better life for his family, living in poverty in Greece and wanting to his family to find a better life. He was sent here and started this hospitality company that now 100 and some years later, my brother and I run and own and operate. And we have grown it to about 30 properties now. And, we depend on a really strong workforce and certainly people who can afford to eat and play in our establishments. And so it's very important. About a decade ago, I was asked to attend a meeting in Harrisburg through the United Way, where they had asked certain business leaders in the community to attend a meeting to learn a little bit about this topic of early childhood education. And I will tell you this, at the time, I only went to the meeting because I had a business meeting in Harrisburg, and that's not because I'm not philanthropic or want to help the community, but I really had no idea what early childhood education really had to do with business at the time. And I was asked to go to this meeting where which I attended, and Dr. Shonkoff from the University of Harvard University Early Childhood Education program was speaking. And it was sort of my aha moment. Here's a gentleman who is in this field talking about how important it is for kids between the ages of, really 0 and 5 years old, 6 years old, to get a good education. And at the time, here I am listening to this in this crowd. I have a newborn, a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 5-year-old. And I'm listening to this gentleman speak about how important this is. I am basically starting to realize that, boy, I've got kids at home that I hope we did a good job with because this is so important. I immediately left the meeting, ran over to a phone, grabbed my cell phone, called my wife, and I said, honey, drop everything you're doing and start reading to the kids, because I just found out about something that is so important on the brain development and how the brain is developed from the age of 0 to 5 years old up to 90%. And so that was sort of my aha moment, and I learned more about how important it was to get these kids into programs when they're young and how it can really affect a community and the economic viability of that community for years to come. So that was my start into it about a decade ago, and I've been on the Early Learning Investment Commission ever since, and it's been very rewarding for myself, but I think we've also made a difference here in our community as well.
Absolutely. And of course, I know obviously the purpose of the Early Learning Investment Commission is to get business people like yourself to advocate within their own communities across the state on the importance and in investing and supporting quality early childhood education. And, I still think that, in some areas of the state, we need to do a little bit more of that. There are still business people, especially in smaller communities, who may not be aware of the importance. But I wanted to ask you, in terms of the return, you run a company with many, many employees, and obviously you would knowing now a little bit more about the importance of what impact that has not only on a business, but on your community in terms of investment and the quality workforce and the economic return to the community.
Well, absolutely. I mean, we've got a company that we entertain about 4 million people a year, and all of those people have to have expendable income. We own restaurants and hotels. We own indoor water park, Splash Lagoon. We've got Peak and Peak just outside of Erie in Clymer, New York, which is a big ski resort and a golf resort. And we've got restaurants and hotels in our market like Applebee's and Dunkin' Donuts and things like that. And in order for people to enjoy those businesses, they have to have money in their pocket. In order to have money in your pocket, you have to have a job. If you need a job, you need good education. And that education starts when you're young. And all of the research shows, and I think when you're in business, this is one thing that is very important that we look at every day. And we look at numbers and we look at research and we looked at evidence-based research to make decisions every day. Is it a good idea to build a restaurant in this location? We research it and we figure out whether or not we think it'll work, and we either go forward or we don't. Well, the research has been done, so we use that to our advantage. Well, with respect to kids and education, the research has been done. It is absolutely clear, and it is not an issue on a Democratic or Republican side. It is 100% clear that if kids get a good start in life and a good education when they're young, it changes the rest of their life. And in my situation, we need a good workforce. We need to be able to hire people who can service our customers in a way that makes them want to repeat their visit and have a great time. If we can't get the workforce, we don't have a business. If we don't have the people in our community who have the expendable income to spend money in our facilities, we don't have a business. And that's the way the world works and the economy works. And, what I've seen over time here in Erie is, unfortunately, in a lot of the state of Pennsylvania, I'm holding in my hand an article that was done in the Erie Times News in 2009, and the headline was, "We're now the poorest." It stated that 24% of Erie County residents are living less than the 2008 federal poverty level. Unfortunately, we are getting better, but we're not getting better quick enough. And one of the things that's very evident in all the research that's been done is that the earlier a child gets a good education and is in a situation where they're not living in poverty, the better chances they have of succeeding in life in every way possible. And I know there's been research and studies done on this. And so when you look at the research and studies, this is sort of like a question when I go to speak to people. They say, why is this not being done? Why are kids not getting an education when they're 2 and 3 years old? And I think a big mistake was made years and years ago when someone decided that school starts when a child is 6 or 7 years old. In a lot of communities, it's not even a rule or a policy or a law to go to kindergarten. And so you find, a lot of places have half-day kindergartens to this day, and the kids are arriving unprepared. They're unprepared in third grade. They continue to be unprepared as they get older, and so it's a big issue. And we need to put more money towards getting everybody educated. I think it was a big mistake when they made the rule that school started when you were in kindergarten or first grade and not when you were in preschool. That's really when the public should have started funding from the beginning, but we didn't. So we've got a challenge on our hands, and we've got to work to fix it.
In your dealings with younger people today, do you spot in general any deficiencies in education or on-the-job performance that maybe can't be improved in them now, but could be improved in the next generation by the widespread adoption of early childhood learning?
Well, absolutely. I think one of the things that early childhood education brings to a child is not just numbers and colors. A lot of it is what we call executive soft skills. These are organizational skills where kids learn patience. They learn how to raise their hand. They learn how to look an adult in the face. They learn how to shake someone's hand. They learn that they have to show up on time. They have they understand discipline. And My mother-in-law is a third-grade teacher in a very difficult part of Philadelphia, where 95% of the kids are on assisted living. She can tell within 5 minutes of a class starting in the first part of the year what children were in early childhood education programs and which weren't. And talk to any kindergarten teacher and you'll find that. And the reason is because kids that have been put in a program when they're 2 and 3 and 4 years old learn from a very early age those executive soft skills that you cannot teach, much harder to teach when they get older. And those are some of the things that we see when we go to hire people. We have positions in our company that are entry-level positions for kids who are 18, 19 years old. A lot of them, it's their first job, maybe 15 and 16. And we have positions, obviously, on the upper executive level management positions. But one of the things that we pride ourselves on in our company is that about 60% of our managers started in a line-level position in our company somewhere. The only reason they were able to get that job is because they had a good start and a good beginning. They're not incarcerated. They don't have a police record. They're not into drugs. And a lot of the reason that they were able to get on that straight and narrow path is because they had someone there when they were young, and an early childhood provider was there to get them on the right path. We have too many children who unfortunately get started on the wrong path, and it's very difficult to change that in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that it is critically important, especially in a preschool environment, is the social emotional development of children at that age, which is a critical time. And, you know, there's a lot of adults who may still, who aren't as familiar with the impact of quality early learning when we talk about play. Well, play is obviously learning. And if you go into any quality preschool, you'll see the teachers working with those children in both independent play as well as working with other children. And you'll see in those quality environments, not only the child learning problem-solving skills on their own, but also working with others their own age in on a particular thing that they're both trying to work on together, and the cooperation and the understanding and the communication that goes on. Those are all the skills precisely of what you're talking about, that when they get older, not only in school, but also later in life, is so critically important that we may be lacking in a lot of work environments.
Well, absolutely. And, you know, we want to continue as a company to invest in our community, whether that means to build more restaurants or expand our resorts. One of the challenges we have when we do that is getting a good qualified workforce to run those operations. And, you know, unemployment is an issue here in our community and throughout the state. But, you know, one of the challenges is it's not just unemployment. It's who shows up for the job interview, and are they qualified? Do they have the basic skills so that we can train them on the job that we have available to them? And if they don't have the basic skills, you know, a lot of times they won't be employed. And so I think in some ways we've done a little bit of a disservice to our young ones, because they don't really have a voice. I mean, you don't find a bunch of 4- and 5-year-olds picketing on the corner of your downtown with signs that say, we want better education for our peers and ourselves, because they can't do that. It's like a puppy. I mean, you have to train them. And so they only know what they know. They only have the resources that we give them. And it's unfortunate that somewhere along the line we didn't make this a priority. I think the things that the winds are changing, though, I have to say that. I mean, I've been on this with this group, the Early Learning Investment Commission, for 10 years. And I will say that this is here, just the simple fact that we're doing a radio interview on the subject, I think, is telling. We've seen a big shift and a big move. There's momentum that is going in the right direction, and I think people are opening their eyes and saying, wow, you know, we need to make a change. If you think about smoking, I like this analogy. In 1940 or around that time, the world figured out that smoking wasn't healthy for you. And at the time, a fair amount of the population smoked. I remember my mom, who's in her 70s, would say that her and her mom and dad would smoke at the dinner table because nobody thought any differently of it. It was fine. It was just like any other thing you would do in life. There was no issue with it. no challenges, and nobody had any concerns. Well, fast forward now 60 years, 70 years, and we find that you can't smoke in restaurants. A very small percentage of the community smokes, and things change. As soon as we figured out it was a bad idea, we made a change. It took 70 years, though. Well, it sounds like we've figured out that it's a bad idea not to train and educate our 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. And so things are starting to change. I don't know what it'll look like in 50 or 60 years, but let's hope that every kid gets an opportunity to get a good education when they're 2 and 3 and 4, and that we've made the moves economically to fund those programs.
As you well know, there's a very vocal public outcry, many times from business leaders, to cut back the role of government for the sake of saving taxpayers' dollars. Yet, I guess you support an increase in state spending for early childhood learning. How do you convince your fellow business leaders to follow your example?
Well, I think, one of the things is that I would say is, first of all, I don't think it's throwing more money at it. I think it's reallocating money in a lot of ways. I think there's a lot of government waste out there, and Harrisburg and some of these other state capitals, if you've ever been to them, if you got office after office after office and building after building that they fund through our tax dollars. And there's a lot of money that's being put out there and spent on areas that I think, would better be spent on early childhood education. As far as convincing other business leaders that we need to spend money on this, every time that I have had a speaking engagement, there's been a whole bunch of them over the last decade on this topic, I immediately get business leaders that look at me and say, what can we do to help? How is this not a priority? And again, the fact that we're talking about it now, the fact that politicians have stepped up, the fact that Governor Wolf has put up a fair amount of money to help fund this in his plan, I think is very telling, that we are making a difference and that people are listening. But I don't really necessarily see my role as convincing other business leaders that we need to put money towards this. I think it's important to spread the word on how important, and one of the things that I've been doing is spreading the word on how important this topic is to the economic viability of our community. When you have a teacher who screams about the fact that she's getting kids that are unprepared in her kindergarten class, I think people listen, but they listen with a grain of salt, and they say, well, they just are complaining about their job, and they really are just whining. Well, I'm not a kindergarten teacher. I'm not in education. I'm a private business person. I'm in a totally different seat than they are. And when I speak, I feel like people are listening because it's from a different perspective. It's not on education necessarily. It's about the economic viability and the future of our community. And when we have a headline that says we're now the poorest, on the Erie Times News in 2009, we better all stand up and say, how do we change that? And when all the evidence says one of the ways to change that is to get kids educated when they're younger and get them out of poverty, we need to make some moves to do that. And we have, and that's the good and the positive news.
Right. And one of the things businesses can do, as I know you're well aware of this, Nick, is under the educational improvement tax credit that businesses can contribute. It doesn't have to be to higher education. It can be to any educational entity, including preschool education. For instance, if there's an employee that works in whatever industry, whatever their job, and say like their income is just above the line that qualifies that family for a child care subsidy to be able to enroll their child in quality child care. But then it's still a hardship for that child care cost. This is something that businesses can do because it's going to help the business in the long run and not have an employee that maybe has to be absent one day here and there because they can't find adequate child care, or that employee is worried about their child throughout the day and maybe affects the not only the morale but the output of the employee. So could you comment a little bit about that and how well that may be used in the community?
Well, yeah, and I think it's important that the community understands that program's available. One of the things that our United Way did was really spread the word about that program and get it out to businesses because a lot of them didn't know about it. We're a big contributor to that program for the last number of years, and I think it's made a difference. We actually started what's called Erie's Future Fund here in Erie,
right,
with the Community Foundation and the United Way and our Success by Six program, where we have scholarships for children. And so that money has been able to fund a lot of that. It gets, one of the things it also does is it gets a lot of these mothers, single mothers or fathers, back into the workforce, which is also a very positive thing for the community and the economy. It puts people back to work if they can find child care or, in this case, early childhood education programs for their kids. And so, I think these programs are out there. I think there's opportunities for children to get an education. It's funny. One of the things we talked about earlier was moving money around and how the government provides for line items on the budget that I think are unfortunate. One of them is the prison budget line. If you look at the only line item that increases every year and gets more money is the prison budget line, which is a shock to me because I think in this case you're either paying now or paying later. And so if we can transfer some of that money into early childhood education programs, we don't have to fund so much in the way of prisons when the kids are older.
You may have just answered the question I was going to ask, but I'll ask it anyhow. If we, from a business point of view and financial point of view, if we don't increase the number of kids in early childhood learning programs, what do you see as the consequences? And I think you just gave maybe one of the answers.
Yeah, I think that's one of them. It's frustrating to me being in private business when we see a problem or a challenge in our company. No matter what it is, we bring the team together. We discuss the options. We discuss the reasons for the reasons for the challenge. We figure out a game plan, and we move forward executing a plan that eliminates the problem. And we do it in short order. This is a problem that's obvious. We have all these politicians that know it's a problem, and yet government moves so slowly and is so bogged down by some of these programs and debt that I find it very frustrating that it takes such effort to make such small moves over time. And it's frustrating as a private business person who really, when we see a problem, we fix it immediately. We all see this as a problem. It's obvious. You don't talk to any politicians that ever will say, geez, I don't think our younger kids need educated better. I think they're fine. You asked what's going to happen in the future. I don't think we can't afford to find that out. It scares me. We have communities, unfortunately, that have high poverty rates and what we call generational poverty. My grandfather lived in poverty. My father lived in poverty. I live in poverty, and I expect my children will live in poverty, and that's not good. They need a lifeline. They need a way out. And one of the things Dr. Shonkoff talked about when I listened to him that first time that really blew me away was the same part of the brain that learns how to read and develop properly is the same part of the brain that learns how to fear and deal with anxiety. And if it's preoccupied with fear and anxiety, then it can't properly learn. And I think you find a lot of kids in poverty that are challenged with family situations where there's substance abuse and they don't know where their next meal's coming from. There's domestic violence, and so they're really preoccupied with that fear and anxiety, not allowing their brain to develop properly. First time they ever get to school or into an organized setting is kindergarten, and sometimes it's even first grade.
Nick, I totally hear you and understand you, and I just our time has run up, and but I really appreciate you being on the program. I want you to continue being, which I know you will, an advocate for quality early childhood education, and promise to come back on the program again when we have a little bit more time. But thank you so much.
Absolutely. I appreciate all the work you're doing and the interviews. I'm sure it's making a difference. So thanks for having me on.
And that's our program for today. We'll be back in 2 weeks at the same time. In the meantime, you can go online to learn more at papromiseforchildren.com. For John Poza and the Northwest Regional Key Program for Quality Early Learning, I'm Joe Taylor. Thank you for listening, and have a great day.